Good afternoon. It's great to be here. And today I'm going to talk about sustainable tourism. Over the past 4 decades, it has really become more and more multifaceted. And so I'm going to briefly give you a highlight on sustainable tourism, and then I'm going to share some thoughts on where this industry is headed, but from a different color perspective than just green. So let's see. All right. Okay, oops. Oh, whoa, this is pretty sensitive. Okay. Well, located in the region of Tibet, India, and China is a small Himalayan country of Bhutan. And this is actually one country that I have not had the privilege to visit yet, but has been of great interest to me for several years now. And we're actually creating our Bhutan EcoArts tour program. And during the development process, I visited with Latu, the UN ambassador for Bhutan. And as we were discussing ecotourism development in Bhutan, he handed me this commemorative coin that was handed out during the 2008 coronation of the king. And I think this coin is a great representation of Bhutan's path towards harmony. And I'm going to pass this around so each one of you can take a look at it during the presentation. Just give it back to me at the end. Well, one of the reasons that I've been interested in Bhutan for so long is its exemplary status in implementing happiness within a sustainable model. And in 1972, when the king, the 4th Dragon King of Bhutan, was crowned, he was really trying to decide what should be his philosophy that's going to govern his reign. And he looked at examples around the world of different governments and the motivations of people, and he noticed that a lot of it is centered on economic wealth. And while a few people do attain economic wealth, he also noticed that the majority of the people don't attain this, and many more live in poverty and isolation. So he decided, perhaps this isn't the path for Bhutan that he wants to take. And so from there, he developed the gross national happiness concept. That's a picture of him. So basically, gross national happiness, it balances gross domestic product, or GDP, with the emotional and spiritual well-being of its people. And while some people may say this utopian concept is not relevant for other countries besides Bhutan, it really has been gaining a lot of international attention due to the success in Bhutan. Actually, just this last month in July, the UN General Assembly has adopted the GNH principles, and they invite other member states to implement their own ideas of happiness, and so it's now a development indicator. And although there are other countries that are interested but haven't quite adopted the concept, countries such as Canada, the UK, Brazil, Thailand, they're all shown to be having a lot of interest in it. So it'll be really interesting to see how things transpire in the next few years. Okay. And as Latu really explains, happiness is the most important social progress indicator. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that because it's good to include that in a sustainable model. And happiness is universal from the elderly to the young. And another reason for my interest in Bhutan is due to the fact that tourism industry is based on sustainable travel. And so that means that sustainable travel derives from 3 points: environmental conservation, preservation of cultures, and economic development. And then they implement those 3 principles back to gross national happiness. And lastly, Bhutan makes great measures towards preservation of culture and the arts, or what they refer to as their intangible cultural heritage. And since the early 1990s, with the development of tourism, that's really also propelled and inspired some of the artists to take on their art as a full-time profession, such as weavers. So overall, Bhutan is a really good example of implementing gross national happiness, sustainable tourism, and arts preservation. So beyond the borders of Bhutan, sustainable tourism, there are numerous examples around the world. And this is just a brief timeline of the inception of some of the landmark programs that have taken place around the world. And with a show of hands, can anybody tell me, or can you just show me if you've been to any of these countries that are listed here, apart from the United States? Great. Well, basically, starting in the 1970s to the 1980s, that's when the new industry of ecotourism really took shape. And of those of you who raised your hands, how many of you have been to Costa Rica? Okay, a few of you. That's pretty good. Well, Costa Rica is considered the poster child for ecotourism. And this is due to the fact that in the 1980s, there was a transition in Costa Rica from the staging ground of the US war against Nicaragua, and it was also a testing ground for USAID's free trade policies, and it was transformed into a lab for green tourism. And more than any other event, actually, was the 1987 award of the Nobel Peace Prize to President Sanchez, and so that really propelled Costa Rica onto the world stage and started the ecotourism boom. And then moving to 1990 is the founding of the International Ecotourism Society, and 2002 was designated as the International Year for Ecotourism. And jumping to 2006, the Indigenous Ecotourism Association was founded, and there are numerous examples of indigenous organizations, but this is just one. And jumping to this year, there's a really exciting development here in the United States. The state of New Mexico is the first state to launch a statewide ecotourism initiative, so that's pretty exciting. And also this year, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council was launched, which provides an international baseline standards for sustainable tourism across the board around the world. So that'll definitely prevent a lot of greenwashing and provide more clarity in the industry. And moving on, making sense of sustainable tourism. There are so many terms out there that it leaves consumers feeling confused and industry professionals feeling overwhelmed. And just to put it simply and to reiterate, it goes back to the three basic concepts of economic, environmental, and social sustainability. And for the purposes of clarity, we're going to stick with sustainable tourism. Nice reaction. Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on the negative aspects of the tourism industry, but due to the overconsumptive and unsustainable models of mass tourism, that's when another propulsion of green tourism. And some of the negative impacts that we had been seeing was the degradation of the environment and exploitation of the culture. And actually, only about 5% of mainstream tourism dollars stays within the destination, and that's even today, so that's also another problem. But basically, and just to quickly go over the benefits, so in answer to addressing all of these negative issues, that when developed and implemented correctly, sustainable tourism has proven to address the cultural and natural assets and preserving those and keeping the tourism dollars in destinations and numerous other benefits. So now that I quickly went through some of the aspects of sustainable tourism, let's take a look ahead and look at sustainable tourism trends but that are beyond just green. And as shown with the example of Bhutan, the arts are already a part of sustainable tourism, and it's continuing to grow tremendously in other regions. So I'm going to highlight a few examples for the rest of the presentation. Well, according to a board member of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council and many other experts, the biggest ecological trend for sustainable tourism looking ahead is climate change, and similar to pretty much every other industry. And looking at San Francisco, this is a city with tourism as the largest employer, and across all sectors of the tourism stakeholders, you can see examples of climate change mitigation and reducing emission standards implemented within tourism. For example, when looking at the aviation industry, San Francisco International Airport's Climate Change Action Plan has plans to reduce climate emissions by 80%, to 80% by the year 2050. So that's just one example. And in the cruise industry, you can also visit Alcatraz Island aboard the Hornblower Hybrid, which is the nation's first hybrid ferry, and it operates on solar, wind, and grid electric. And several hotels, such as the Kimpton chain and W Hotel and Orchard Garden Hotel, have implemented a lot of eco-efficient and energy-efficient standards. And looking at the arts in San Francisco, eco-fashion is a growing trend, and a lot of the artists are also trying to contribute to the climate challenge. And one in specific is a jewelry designer. Her name is Josie Adele, and she integrates a lot of different measures within her work, including local production, using recycled materials, and she also includes carbon offsets in the purchase of every one of her eco-friendly lines. So it's just one example of what's going on in San Francisco. Now, jumping to another region, the Caribbean, from Cuba to Bolivia, Vietnam to Arkansas, integrating culinary arts with agritourism or agriculture tourism is a growing sector. And just to give you a real brief look at what's been happening in Cuba, well, during the 1980s to early 1990s, when the collapse of the socialist bloc occurred and the loss of trading partners, what ensued was a really, really severe economic crisis in Cuba, which many of the Cubans refer to as the special period. And also what happened during this time is that there was a big shift in the agriculture sector. So instead of large-scale high-tech farms, it moved to small-scale production and the birth of urban agriculture in Cuba. And actually, on a recent trip this past June on a Cuba EcoArts tour, we visited a cooperative called Vivero a la Mar, and that's in a suburb of Havana. And it's really doing well. It's a model for increasing decentralized food security and fostering community involvement in the cooperative. So it's pretty amazing. And then when you add agritourism on top of that, visitors can come and volunteer and work with the cooperative members and even eat with the cooperative members and support their efforts. And then the culinary journey continues by visiting tobacco farms and meeting with chefs at paladars or visiting the eco-community of Las Terrazas. And moving on to, oops, I didn't skip, there we go. Sorry. And moving on to performing arts, specifically looking at dance. And dance really serves as a conduit for people to transcend through cultures and environments and complex topics. So on a social level, dance transcends language barriers in regards to providing intimate people-to-people interactions. And on an economic level, it provides a viable economic product by taking dance lessons or attending cultural performances. And in North India, for example, there is a really good example of a dance integration with sustainable travel with an organization called Ecosphere Spiti. And this is a community collaborative run all by local community members, and they've been really recognized by the international community for some of their landmark programs. And just to give you the context, Spiti Valley, India is in the Himalayan region of India, and only about 3,000 to 5,000 people visit this region annually. And some of their impressive programs range from solar passive houses in the villages to the preservation of an endangered dance form. And this is the endangered dance form of the Bhutans, and they are a rare sect of Tibetan monks found only in this region of Spiti Valley. And this community organization is working with the Bhutans to try to help with the continuance of this theatrical dance form. And then so when entities such as EcoArts Tours also includes the Bhutans in the program, then it's also our way of promoting and supporting their efforts. And the last example is fine arts, looking at Papua New Guinea. Has anybody ever been to Papua New Guinea? Is that just one person? Yeah, it's pretty the norm. Papua New Guinea isn't widely visited, but it's amazing. I highly recommend it. Papua New Guinea occupies the eastern half of the New Guinea island, and Indonesia is on the western portion. And located in the Kokori province of Papua New Guinea is a small village called Babaguna. And during a visit there, when I was conducting some ecotourism assessments, I met with the Babaguna headman, and we were sitting in his longhouse that he had constructed for visitors, and all the village was there, and he was just talking about ecotourism development as well as his desire to revive the culture by teaching youth the traditional arts. And this is an example of his son and his recent mask carving. And as with other indigenous communities around the world, in PNG, no distinction exists between cultural and environmental conservation. So therefore, there's no distinction between arts conservation and natural conservation or environmental conservation. And ecologically is located in the South Pacific region. PNG lies in the region that has the most marine biodiversity in the world, most extensive coral reef system, and has the highest level of endemic species. And culturally, Papua New Guinea is considered to be the most linguistically diverse country in the world, with over 800 languages spoken. And although many of the arts are similar throughout the country, there are definite distinctions between them that really distinguish the cultural diversity of Papua New Guinea. And this is an example of an arts and crafts center in a village that will showcase traditional art of the Foi people, and they're also trying to integrate youth education. And going back to the mask example, masks are the most important cultural symbol of Papua New Guinea, and since 1995, the government has been implementing the National Mask Festival, which really promotes the mask cultures of the New Guinea Islands and the Momase and Gulf regions. And many regions are also creating their own arts-centered festivals and annual events as well to really integrate arts with sustainable tourism. So in closing, now that we have explored the many colors of sustainable tourism looking ahead, I want to leave you with this quote and a thought. As Arun Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, has shared with me on numerous discussions, we really need to turn back to Gandhi's principles of nonviolence. Nonviolence against humanity and nonviolence against nature. And that's in order to really see the change that we want to see in the world, which seems to be a sustainable world. And so he always challenges me, and I want to share this message of including and integrating Gandhi's principles within sustainable tourism and within your own line of business, your own industries as well. And I challenge you, the next time you travel and you want to be green and socially conscious, connect with a local artist and really fully appreciate the role that artists have with the sustainable movement and the connection of arts with nature. Thank you very much.